Emily had spent most of the summer helping her mother sort through her late grandmother's belongings. The old house, with its creaking wooden floors and dusty furniture, felt both comforting and eerie. She hadn't been up to the attic in years, and today, with the task of sorting through old boxes, she decided to venture up there. The attic was filled with forgotten treasures. Old books, old photographs, and wooden furniture covered in sheets, but it was the large ornate mirror tucked in the corner behind a dusty chest that caught her eye. The frame was beautiful, with intricate carvings, but something about it seemed strange. She felt an odd pull to it, as though it were calling her. After a quick inspection, she found that the mirror was heavy but manageable. She wiped away the dust and carefully set it upright, noticing the way the glass seemed to shimmer. The reflection didn't show the attic at all. It showed a scene, blurred and out of focus at first, but quickly coming into sharp view. A man stood in a dark alley, and another figure approached from behind, holding a knife. The scene felt too real, too vivid. Emily froze as she watched the man gasp and fall to the ground. Blood pooled around him. The vision faded, leaving her staring into the mirror's now empty glass. She blinked, her heart racing. Was she imagining it, or had she just seen a murder in the reflection of a mirror? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to know more. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, replaying the horrific image from the mirror. Who was the man in the alley? Why had the mirror shown her such a grisly scene? She tried to convince herself it was nothing more than a figment of her imagination, but something about it felt far too real. The next day, Emily found herself drawn back to the attic. Her mother had been busy in the kitchen, so she had a moment to herself. The mirror still stood there in the corner, waiting for her. She hesitated for a moment, then walked toward it, heart pounding. She had to know if what she'd seen was a one-time thing, or if there was something more to it. As soon as her eyes met the glass, she saw another scene unfolding. This time, it was a woman, a young woman, no older than Emily herself. The woman was standing in a kitchen, chopping vegetables, her back to someone lurking behind her. The knife in her hand trembled, unaware of the danger approaching. Emily's pulse quickened as the figure in the background raised a large object, preparing to strike. The vision was so vivid, so real. She wanted to scream, but she couldn't tear her eyes away. Before she could understand what she was seeing, the vision faded again. The kitchen was empty. The mirror reflected only her own face now. But she knew. She knew she had seen a future death. The feeling was undeniable, and now she had to figure out how to stop it. Emily spent the following days in a daze, trying to make sense of what she had seen. Every time she looked into the mirror, another horrific murder would play out before her eyes. The reflections weren't just random. Each victim seemed to be connected to her in some way. The man in the alley, he resembled a neighbor she'd seen walking his dog every morning. The woman in the kitchen? She was a girl Emily had recently met at a local cafe. At first, Emily thought she was just imagining the connections, but the more she watched the mirror, the clearer it became. The events weren't isolated. They were tied to her life, her friends, and her family. As the days passed, the murder visions continued to haunt her, each one more chilling than the last. Emily knew she had to act. She couldn't just sit back and let these murders unfold. But the more she thought about it, the more impossible it seemed to stop them. The people in the visions were all living their lives, unaware of the death waiting for them. And Emily? She had no idea how to prevent something that hadn't happened yet. She was just a girl with an ancient mirror showing her the future. What good could that possibly do? But something inside her, something deep in her gut, told her she couldn't give up. She had to try. The following evening, Emily couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that the next murder might be someone she cared about. She stood in front of the mirror, watching as a new scene began to unfold. This time, the reflection wasn't a stranger. It was her best friend, Claire. Claire was walking home from the library late at night, her phone in hand, oblivious to the dark figure following her. Emily's heart began to race. She watched helplessly as Claire turned a corner and came face to face with the figure. The man lunged at her, and a struggle ensued. "No!" Emily cried out, slapping her hands against the mirror in desperation. But nothing changed. The vision continued to play out. Claire fought back, but it was clear the man was stronger. Emily's breath hitched as she watched him overpower her friend, dragging her into the shadows. The scene was so lifelike it made Emily want to vomit. She had to stop this. Her mind raced. Could she warn Claire? Would she even believe her? Would it matter? As the vision reached its climax, Emily felt a chill run down her spine. There had to be something she could do. She couldn't just stand by and watch her best friend die. Emily barely slept that night. Her thoughts raced, plotting every detail of the vision she had seen. She knew Claire had a study group at the library that evening, and the timing was crucial. If she could get to her in time, maybe, just maybe, she could prevent the attack. She spent the next morning talking herself through the plan. She had to convince Claire that something was wrong without scaring her. She couldn't afford for Claire to think she was crazy, especially when every warning felt like it might be her last chance. By the time Emily met Claire at lunch, her nerves were frayed. She had to act fast. The clock was ticking. "Hey, Claire, I need to talk to you about something," Emily said, trying to keep her voice steady. Claire raised an eyebrow. "What's up?" I don't know how to explain this, but I think you're in danger tonight," Emily said, her words tumbling out. "You need to be careful when you leave the library." Claire looked at her like she had lost her mind. "What are you talking about? I'll be fine. It's just a quick walk home." "Please?" Emily insisted, her voice shaky. "Just let me drive you home tonight. I don't want you walking alone." Claire hesitated, but finally agreed. Emily felt a slight sense of relief, but she knew it wasn't enough. The vision had shown Claire in danger, but she hadn't seen how it ended. Could she change the future by being there? Or would it be too late? Before we continue the story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. As the story progresses, Emily uncovers more details about the mirror, faces dangers she can't predict, and confronts deeper secrets about her family's history. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on more stories like this one. Emily spent the entire afternoon pacing around her room, trying to make sense of everything. The vision of Claire's near-death experience felt like a wake-up call, but there was still something about the mirror that didn't sit right with her. It wasn't just showing random murders. It was showing deaths tied to people she knew. She had to understand why. That evening, she decided to go through her grandmother's old journals, hoping for a clue. She had seen a few books and papers scattered across the attic when she found the mirror, so she headed up there once again, the sense of urgency tugging at her. Her grandmother, Evelyn, had always been a private woman, and Emily remembered her mother saying there were parts of Evelyn's life no one ever spoke of. As she dug through boxes of old letters and photo albums, she stumbled upon a small, leather-bound notebook. It was old, with yellowed pages and faint writing. Emily flipped it open, and her breath caught in her throat. The first few pages were filled with family records. But as she turned further, she found something much darker. In the journal, Evelyn wrote about an old mirror that had been passed down through generations, a mirror that showed the deaths of those around them before they happened. Emily's heart raced as she read on. The journal spoke of the mirror's curse, a curse that had been ignored for decades because anyone who tried to destroy it met a grim fate. Evelyn had warned that the mirror's power only grew stronger with time, and whoever used it would inevitably be caught in its web. Emily's eyes flicked back to the mirror in the corner of the attic. She knew now that the answers she sought were in her grandmother's past. But would they help her stop the murders? Or would she fall victim to the same fate? The next day, Emily tried to stay focused. Claire was safe, at least for now, and Emily had managed to convince her not to walk home alone. But the fear gnawing at her was almost unbearable. The mirror hadn't just shown Claire's death, it had shown a pattern. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that the murders weren't random, they were deliberate. Each person who died had some connection to her, and Emily had become a part of that pattern. She decided to confront her mother. Emily had to know if there was something more to her grandmother's strange warnings. But her mother, Rebecca, was always so tight-lipped about the family's past, and the thought of digging into those old wounds made Emily hesitate. Still, she had no other choice. If she could understand why her grandmother had left her the mirror, maybe she could break the cycle. When Emily broached the subject over dinner, her mother froze. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. Emily nodded slowly, her stomach sinking. "The mirror. It's showing me murders. People I know." Rebecca's face turned pale, and her hands shook as she put down her fork. "I thought you'd be the one to see it. It always passes down to the firstborn in each generation." Emily's mind raced. "What is it? What does it want?" Her mother sighed deeply, looking around as if she feared someone might be listening. "It's not just a mirror, Emily. It's a curse. Your grandmother thought she could destroy it, but it never works. You need to be careful. You've got to stop using it before it's too late." But Emily couldn't let go of the feeling that the mirror was the only way to stop the deaths. She had to know more about the curse and why it kept following her family. Emily didn't sleep that night. Her mind was overwhelmed with the journal's cryptic words and her mother's warnings. She knew she had to stop the killings, but she wasn't sure how. The mirror showed her the deaths, but could it also show her a way out of the curse? Or was it only a tool for her destruction? At midnight, Emily sneaked back up to the attic. The mirror was still in the corner, waiting for her. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should even look into it again. But her heart told her she had no choice. She needed answers. She stood before the mirror, steeling herself for what was to come. The glass shimmered, and before she could even think, the vision started. But this time, it wasn't just another random death. It was the most terrifying one yet. In the reflection, Emily saw herself. She stood in her own bedroom, her face pale, staring at the mirror. The scene was exactly as it was in real life, except for the shadowy figure lurking behind her. Emily's breath caught as the figure raised a knife. She felt an icy chill crawl up her spine. "No!" she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the silence of the attic. The figure struck. Emily watched helplessly as the shadowy figure plunged the knife into her own chest. She stumbled back, clutching her wound, and then collapsed, her body crumpling to the floor. The vision ended abruptly, and the mirror fell silent. Emily's pulse raced, and she stumbled backward, her body trembling. She had seen her own death, her own brutal, violent death. She was next. The weight of the vision crushed Emily's spirit. She knew that death was closing in and there was no time to waste. But how could she stop something that was inevitable? Every time she looked into the mirror, it showed her something worse. It was as if she was powerless to change the outcome, and the more she tried to intervene, the more she felt the curse tightening its grip on her. The next day, Emily couldn't shake the image of her own death from her mind. She barely touched her food, and her mother noticed the exhaustion in her eyes. "You need to stop using that mirror," Rebecca said, her voice stern. "I know it's tempting, but it's dangerous. You can't keep doing this to yourself." But Emily couldn't stop. She had to know how to save herself, how to save the people she loved. She needed to understand the mirror's curse before it was too late. There was one person who might have answers, the one person who had been trying to destroy the mirror for years, her grandmother, Eveline. But Eveline had disappeared long before Emily was born. Emmeline had to find out what had happened to her grandmother and why she had left the mirror behind. Determined, Emily made a plan. She would go through the old house, piece by piece, and find every scrap of information she could about her grandmother's attempts to rid the family of the cursed mirror. Time was running out, and Emily couldn't wait any longer. Emily's determination to uncover the truth about her grandmother's past led her to the one place she hadn't yet searched: the basement. Her grandmother, Evelyn, had always been a private woman, and there was a chilling air of mystery around her life. Emily had heard rumors about her grandmother's eccentricities and strange habits, but she never imagined it might all be connected to the cursed mirror. The basement was damp and musty, with shelves of old books and boxes of forgotten trinkets. As Emily sifted through the clutter, she found an old chest in the far corner, hidden beneath layers of dust and cobwebs. The chest was locked, but a small key rested nearby, tucked into a drawer of an old workbench. Her hands shook as she inserted the key and opened the chest, revealing a collection of journals, photographs, and letters. At the top of the pile was a journal that looked much like the one she had found in the attic. This one was thicker, its pages filled with faded handwriting. She flipped it open and began to read. The entries were written in her grandmother's meticulous handwriting, chronicling her growing obsession with the mirror. Evelyn had first discovered its dark power as a young woman. She wrote about the mirror's ability to show death, the deaths of loved ones, of friends, of strangers. But what was most unsettling was the warning Evelyn had written at the end of one entry. If the mirror is not destroyed, the curse will pass to the next generation. Emily's stomach twisted. It was clear now that her grandmother had been trying to stop the curse, but had failed. The mirror had claimed her grandmother's sanity, and now it was trying to claim Emily's life. Emily spent the rest of the night reading through the journal. The entries were filled with detailed accounts of her grandmother's struggle against the mirror, each entry growing more desperate as time went on. Evelyn had tried everything: burning the mirror, hiding it, even attempting to bury it, but nothing worked. The mirror always returned, always revealing more deaths, more bloodshed. Emily's heart sank as she read about her grandmother's final entry, written just days before her disappearance. "The mirror is my prison. It controls everything, and I cannot escape it. I fear it has already chosen its next victim. Emily must understand. She must not make the same mistakes I did. She must destroy it before it destroys her." Emily's eyes filled with tears. Her grandmother had known. She had known that Emily would be the one to inherit the curse, and she had tried to warn her. But how could Emily destroy the mirror when it seemed so powerful, so indestructible? She needed to know more about its origins, how it had come to be, who had created it, and why it had targeted her family. There was only one place left to search, her grandmother's old library, where she had kept a collection of rare books. Maybe there Emily could find the answers she so desperately needed. The library was as ancient as the rest of the house, filled with shelves of old, leather-bound books and dusty scrolls. Emily had never been particularly interested in her grandmother's collection, but now she felt drawn to it. She combed through the shelves, searching for anything that could explain the origins of the cursed mirror. Hours passed, and she began to lose hope. Then, tucked away behind a stack of forgotten volumes, she found a book with a black cover and no title. It looked old, older than anything else in the room. Emily's heart raced as she pulled it from the shelf. As soon as she opened the book, she was hit with the scent of aged paper and ink. The pages were filled with strange symbols and cryptic writing, but the further she read, the more she understood. The book told the story of a powerful sorcerer who had crafted a mirror capable of seeing into the future and beyond. This sorcerer had used the mirror to gain power and control, but eventually the mirror began to show not just the future, but the deaths of those who came into contact with it. It was cursed, designed to trap the souls of its victims, one after another, until the mirror became an unstoppable force. Emily's pulse quickened as she turned the page. According to the book, the only way to destroy the mirror was to break its connection to the person it had chosen as its next victim. And that, it seemed, was Emily. She was the final key. The gravity of what she had just learned sank in as Emily sat alone in the library, the book open before her. The mirror was a tool of pure evil, created with the intention of trapping souls and feeding off their fear and pain. And it was only getting stronger. Each death it predicted made it more powerful, and each vision made it harder to escape. But there was hope. If Emily could sever her connection to the mirror, she could break the curse. She had to stop the mirror from showing her future deaths, and to do that, she would have to confront her deepest fear, the fear of losing everyone she loved. The book detailed a ritual, complicated and dangerous, that would weaken the mirror's hold over her. But the ritual required something she didn't have, the blood of the one who had made the mirror. Emily was certain that the sorcerer who created the cursed object was long gone, but his legacy remained. Somewhere in the house there had to be a trace of him, something that would allow her to complete the ritual and destroy the mirror. Her first thought was to visit the local historical society. She had heard stories of an ancient artifact that had been discovered in the area years ago. Maybe this artifact was connected to the sorcerer. If she could find it, she could finish what her grandmother had started. But time was running out. The visions were becoming more frequent, and the next one was bound to be worse than the last. That night, as Emily lay in bed trying to gather her thoughts, she felt the familiar chill in the air. She didn't need to look at the mirror to know that another vision was coming. The pull of the glass was irresistible, and her body responded before her mind had a chance to protest. This time, the reflection was darker than ever before. Emily saw the familiar face, Claire, her best friend, smiling and laughing at a cafe. But the image quickly shifted. Claire was walking home again, just as she had in the earlier vision, but this time, Emily saw something different. A figure, taller, more menacing, lurking in the shadows behind her. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The figure wasn't just following Claire, it was a part of the same pattern she had seen before. It was as if the mirror was showing her the moment Claire's fate was sealed. But this time, it wasn't just a warning, it was a countdown. The figure reached out to grab Claire, but before Emily could scream, the reflection shifted. It was as if the mirror was mocking her, showing her Claire's death, and then taking it away, only to replace it with another. Emily couldn't take it anymore. She slammed her hand against the glass, trying to break the connection, but the reflection continued to change. Each time she tried to look away, the next death would appear. She had to act fast. She couldn't let Claire or anyone else fall victim to the curse. But the more she saw, the more she realized that she was running out of time. In the next parts, Emily will search for the artifact that holds the key to breaking the curse, confront deeper truths about the sorcerer, and face the increasingly dangerous visions in a race against time to stop the murders and destroy the cursed mirror once and for all.